So key elements in English. So we're now looking at the thesis statement. So the thesis is your argument. It's built from your own opinion of the text and what the author has done to write it into the piece it is. So while you are basing it on your opinion, you've obviously got to be able to support it in some way. So before you write a thesis, perform a bit of a vibe check. It goes into your introduction and it needs to be clear and precise. So in terms of the structure of your introduction, usually I go with the idea of having one context sentence. That sentence is where you introduce what you're talking about. So it'll be the text that you're looking at, the author, perhaps the time period, and a little bit of something that's relevant to what you're actually going to be discussing. So in Shakespeare's Macbeth, women were viewed in this particular way, if your essay was about how women were viewed in Macbeth. Then after you've got that context down pat, you would then have your signposting sentences, and they would introduce the points that you're going to make in your body paragraphs. So the order that you mention those in the introduction is then the order that you'll take for the body paragraphs. So whatever the first thing it is that you mention in the introduction, that will become the first body paragraph, and so on. And then lastly, after the signposting, you would then have your thesis at the end of the introduction. And just with the signposting as well, you can do that in multiple ways, of course. So one way is to have 3 separate sentences for your 3 separate points, which is generally what you need to do if it's a relatively complicated kind of thing to explain. If it's less complicated, just depending on the topic and your approach to it, you could have just one sentence signposting all 3, or you could have two sentences, one sentence incorporating 2 points and one sentence just having 1. So that all depends on what you're talking about. So to write a good thesis, use exact words that are found in the prompt so your marker knows exactly what you plan on arguing. You need to refer back to your thesis throughout your work so that you can show you are proving your point. That's the whole job that you've got with an essay. So show the marker your logic leads back to your thesis. There's no point having evidence or analysis that aren't directly related to what the task is that you've been given, the prompt or the question. So referring back to your thesis makes sure that you're always going to be on task. So whether it's analytical, creative, or persuasive, a good piece of writing is going to flow really well. So this means that English isn't just a whole bunch of sentences strung together. You need to really put some thought into the way that you format this to make it flow. You have logic to your conversations because you have a point that you want to communicate. And the same goes for when you're communicating in an essay. Everything needs to add to your argument. So you have your thesis, but then the points actually build on that. The thesis is the umbrella, and the points come under that to hold the umbrella up. In creative writing, you need to push your story forward and add meaning with each sentence. So everything that you write in a short story should be really needed. Because of the word count, you don't have time to talk about things that aren't really relevant in short story writing. So starting in the middle of things, starting at a time in the progression of events where something exciting is about to happen, that's what you should do to make sure that you're really adding to everything. You don't want to start with a character getting out of bed in the morning if that's not actually a big deal in your story. And then in persuasive writing, you need to, of course, convince the audience continually to make sure that they agree with whatever it is that you're arguing. Voice. So what do we mean by voice? It's somewhat surprising how important it is and how useful it is to use your voice as the author in English. So your voice can be helpful to show your own sort of opinions. They help you build things in terms of like short stories. You have certain knowledge, certain experiences, and you can use those to create your ideas for a short story. Write what's familiar to you, because that's what you're going to enjoy more, and that's what you know better as well. Write what you're passionate about, so it's something that you actually have the motivation to go with. You can have your voice get into your work authentically and without much effort when you have that authentic idea of what you actually believe yourself. So if for a persuasive piece, an obvious example, if you actually don't believe something, then don't try and argue that you do believe it, because that's incredibly hard to think about arguments to support it, to be passionate when you're thinking about all the ways that you can write it, and when you're delivering it, if it's a speech. So making sure that you actually believe what you're writing about. And people believe you as well if you sound human and not like a robot. So you want to show that passion, show your genuine thoughts and your genuine reasoning.